Well, that kills the ACC. This is an emergency Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. Multiple sources are reporting that UNC is not just preparing to leave the ACC, they are taking necessary action steps to exit for the SEC or the Big Ten. We will start there. We'll also talk athletes no longer employees of their school. Quite possibly Donald Trump has taken the major player who was representing athletes in that conversation out of the conversation altogether. And this could mean that revenue sharing from the university to its students as a W-2 or 1099 goes away. We'll also get into Big 12 coaches who will be fired. Oh, it's a packed show right there. That's a packed show with a whole lot to talk about. If you hit subscribe, I get to keep my job. Greg Pflugar, who is one of the most connected expansion and realignment experts out there, someone who follows it very closely at Pflug Empire on Twitter, posts the UNC logo. It is talked about how the Tar Heels will put their own stake in the ground. From there, multiple different members of the app with multiple different sources have all thrown out rumors that seem fairly valid. This one from Randy. UNC is not staying in the ACC. They have talked to the SEC and Big Ten, which wouldn't shock me at all. The Jordan brand, Bill Belichick. We're talking about a university that wants to move up. We're talking about a league in the ACC that is making... Listen to this. You may hear them and be like, why would UNC ever do... Jordan brand, okay? ESPN certainly wants to keep UNC and what they have in not just basketball, but also football because of their brand and because of Bill Belichick. And the ACC and the Big 12 make a whole lot less money from the College Football Playoff Committee, a whole lot less money from the TV networks themselves, and it behooves any university to be in a league not named the ACC. This report continues. ESPN doesn't want to lose UNC. ESPN will fight hard to move UNC to the SEC. That's where ESPN controls its domain. The SEC is their major player in college football, not the Big Ten. They are Fox. He continues, I expect the SEC to go to 20 schools. Feel comfortable stating this after sourcing info and talking to my ESPN contact. Others have replied to this and chimed in with Rudy saying it's inevitable that UNC, NC State, FSU, Clemson go to the SEC. The Big Ten will grab Notre Dame plus a Florida school. The question becomes, does Nebraska jump to the SEC over NC State and USF replace Nebraska in the Big Ten? When push comes to shove, UNC and NC State won't be attached at the hip. The Big Ten is interested in UNC and would never take NC State. The ACC and Big 12 will be G8 status if this happens. This is where it's a doomsday scenario, not just for the Atlantic Coast Conference, but also for the Big 12. The second that the power two, and I don't mind calling them the power two. It sucks that we've gotten there, but the reason that that's appropriate is because legitimately these TV networks are paying them a lot more money, and the College Football Playoff Committee itself, the governing tournament of our sport. This would be like if the NCAA's March Madness said, you know what? No matter who wins or loses, our revenue payout is going to go mostly to the Big 12 conference because they're really good at basketball. Like, what? Oh, they bring us more viewership and they win a lot in the postseason, so we're going to give them more money, no matter what they do. What? That's the way that revenue is shared from the College Football Playoff Committee to different conferences. They weight it to the point where if you are a Utah, if you're a BYU, if you're a UNC, if you're a Florida State, you want to go somewhere else. We are trying to monopolize college football to one super league, to one super cell of 15, 20, 25 teams. We're trying to make it the NFL where they all compete together. And maybe we do pay our athletes. NIL has gone rampant. And players are making more than coaches. That is where college football, the direction it's headed in. And a year ago, I wouldn't have said that. A year ago, I wouldn't have subscribed to that. There was all this fear-mongering that, oh, this is the trajectory that we're going with college football. But I laid in bed last night and thought, oh, shoot, That is actually what we're doing, because the money, like what you're seeing from ESPN right now is they are pulling the strings. They're the puppet master of this whole deal. And if they want UNC, that's my question here. If they want UNC in the SEC, who's going to stop it? Who's going to stop it? If Fox wants Notre Dame in the Big Ten, NBC could stop that. But if Fox wants Utah in the Big Ten, who's going to stop it? Who has the power to say, no, stay? I don't think TNT is there yet. I don't think ESPN would stick its neck out to save BYU in the Big 12 when they could go to the Big 10. Randy continues, if UNC can figure out the ACC grant of rights, this is all possible. However, ESPN will fight hard to keep them in the network and away from the Big 10. Don't be surprised if ESPN works their magic to keep UNC happy and in the SEC. Also, don't focus on the timeline, too many moving parts. Just know UNC is playing chess here for positioning with ESPN. They hired Bill Belichick. They didn't hire Bill Belichick to square off against Syracuse every year. They didn't hire Bill Belichick to square off with Miami's defense every year, or a depleted Florida State, or to play Wake Forest. They hired Bill Belichick. They have the Jordan brand, they have basketball, and they have all those things so they can leverage them into a better situation financially moving forward. Let's be honest with ourselves. And this sucks for someone who's covered the Big 12 for so long and someone who's been a fan of a Big 12 team for so long. If anyone came to your university, to your university president, and said, I want you to join the SEC, they're handcuffed here. Right? They at that point, they're like, oh, shoot, I kind of have to. I can make $55 million a year from a TV contract, or I can make $30 million a year from a TV contract. It's just going to change your entire university and the way your athletic department operates. That is something that is tough to turn down. The Big 12 is still dominating the transfer portal. The Big 12 is still dominating on the football field itself. This conference made a great case to be the second or third best conference in America this past season, third at the very least. But winning doesn't matter anymore. Status does. Money does. And that's what a move like UNC going to the SEC and the Big 10 will do. It will kill the Big 12. It will kill the ACC because of status. And that sucks. And guess what? There's no one around. You're looking for somebody to save us. Somebody help, please. The wolves are attacking. We need someone to assist. No, it turns out all the people at the top they're all wolves, actually, and there's nobody that really cares to help. It sounds dour, and it sucks for me who host Locked On Big 12, because I'd like to keep hosting Locked On Big 12, and I do think I'll be able to for a couple of years, but this is what we're spiraling towards. We're spiraling towards money making every decision, and you're seeing it at the player level. They're making more money than the coaches. You're seeing it at the university level. They want to go to a bigger conference and make more money in a bigger network, and that is going to kill the product. My son will never be able to root for the same player for 4 years at that university alongside that player's best friends, and they all came through together, and these legendary three guys are the ones who saved the school. No, he's going to root for the kid who came as a fifth-year senior for Wake Forest, who is a grad transfer quarterback, and came in and helped win a national championship for my team. My son couldn't even buy the jersey because the kid was on campus for 7 months. That's it. That's the realization. I don't have a son yet. Maybe one day. Coming up, athletes are not employees of schools anymore. They might not be. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is where I go. FanDuel is where I go for the Super Bowl. And I say, hey, I know everybody's riding Kansas City. Three-peat. Patrick Mahomes, don't want to bet against him, but with Super Bowl 59 here, one game, two teams, endless possibilities. I'm riding the Eagles at FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, tails, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Just bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official Super Bowl partner of Super Bowl 59. That's FanDuel.
A big update where, at least for now, there's been a lot of talk about whether or not athletes at schools would become employees. It doesn't seem like that's the route we're going, at least for the time being.
Yeah, so per multiple sources, the Trump administration has terminated NLRB General Counsel Jennifer Abruzzo, widely considered one of the most union-friendly people in modern U.S. history, to serve in the role. That's from Lauren K. Gurley. And what does that do? Well, Ross Dellinger breaks it down for us. The expected ouster of Abruzzo, a leader in the movement to have college athletes become employees, has arrived. And one of the articles, FisherPhillips.com, that I've read from says that Jennifer Abruzzo took another big step a couple of years ago in continuing the saga surrounding college sports by filing a complaint seeking to have student athletes classified as employees under the National Labor Relations Act. So if you first, let's start here, TJ. Those are three tweets and articles that I just pulled up. Does that make sense? Is it easy to derive where we're if you're a college athlete, you're losing the number one person who's trying to represent you to become an employee?
I mean, it's not great, but also, I guess the speculative point of this is I don't know that Trump removed her for this reason. I don't know how much he actually cares. So the next person very much could kind of have the same view on this specific topic. I don't think Trump made this decision with the NCAA in mind. Could have, right? I'm not speaking for him. He does enough of that on his own. But I do think that the next person that gets in to maybe play the devil's advocate could think the same way on this and then very differently on the reasons why Trump removed her. Trump didn't put out a tweet yet that I've seen on why he moved on. And so it's not all bad, I guess, but it's just a kind of a TBD. But at least the person that has been so vocal about it won't be. And so you'd imagine that probably the next person has some differences of opinions. But there's a chance.
And you're spot on here. I don't think that an administrator looked at the Abruzzo woman and said, you know what, you're done because you want college athletes to be employees of the university. I'm sure there are so many different things at play here. But that being paramount for what we've come to the table for, it shows that if I'm a junior at Syracuse and my school doesn't really do NIL and I want to be an employee of the university and make money and have revenue sharing, that might not happen. And TJ, I think the question becomes this. What we all have to decide, and I want to know your thoughts too, what we all have to decide, are we fans of student athletes being a W-2 employee of a university, or are we fans of NIL continuing to be as it is and the universities keeping their own dollars out of it? That becomes the question, because with this move, it seems as though we're inching further away from students being actual employees of their university, a la NFL style.
Not to go so political here, but I think there's pros and cons to both. Right. And so
play both sides. Do it.
Right. I'm going to do it. But I think what is ultimately best, maybe for college football, is for them to be employees. Maybe that would fix a little bit of our NIL craziness that we've got going on. Maybe that we're able to, tear some of that back, peel some of that back that we've opened Pandora's box, to use all the cliches, and kind of bring some semblance back to college football. I do think there's some pros from that. Ultimately, it would give the athletes, employees, some benefits, some health benefits, some things that they're not currently getting. I mean, I don't know if you ever worked a W-2 job versus a 1099 job, if you're out there listening, but there are some benefits to being 1099. You usually get paid a little bit more, but there are some security benefits to being an employee. You're given certain protections, some legal protections by being an employee that the schools, let's be real, don't want to pay. That's why they're not employees, because the schools don't want to pay that at this moment. And so I think there are some pros, some cons. Ultimately, though, I don't think that schools, one, want to do this. Two, I don't think that the NCAA wants this by any means. And so ultimately, this is probably bad for the athlete, bad for college football in general, good for the schools, good for the people that are holding all the power and all the money, kind of like college football has always been. So again, very political, but I think it's pros and cons both ways.
You played it down the middle beautifully, TJ, and you used Pandora's box as well. Looking at something like this, I think of a Jamie Pollard, who's the athletic director at Iowa State, who's not very well known across the country as an AD, right? We talk about the Bubba Cunninghams who have served on major boards or been a part of the college football playoff committee. That's not the case for Pollard. He's a guy who's very blue collar, comes out and says, hey, we're in Ames. We had to put building projects, additions to our stadiums, whether it be Hilton or Jack Trice, on hold because we're now worried that students will become employees of our universities. And if that becomes the case, I don't know if we can afford that as much as an Ohio State could to pay their players as a part of their university. And Linda Livingstone, the president at Baylor, who is she's the chair of multiple different committees, has asked the question, where does Title IX fit into this? Are you paying a volleyball player the same amount as a football player? And if you're not, how does Title IX factor into that? So what will answer a lot of those questions very easily is by saying, hey, we're just not going to do it anymore. And the person who's spearheading this, like you said, someone else could step into this role and also spearhead it. But if you're asking your run-of-the-mill guy from Birmingham, Alabama, hey, do you want collegiate athletes to get paid? I mean, and college football is a primarily Southern sport. We've seen that with the SEC winning, 15 of the last 17 national championships, 18 national championships. When we pose those questions to your run-of-the-mill college football fan, they're probably going to answer with, I don't want those students to be, sure, let them get paid, but I don't want them to be actual employees of the university. That ruins the integrity of what college football is. I can only imagine that whoever steps into this role will not be as vocal about athletes becoming employees. And TJ, if we're going to hold on to what we love about college football, maybe that does push us in the right direction, back into the right direction. And again, I want to reiterate what you said. You kind of remove all politics from this. It's just someone who's on the forefront at the government level of having student athletes being employees is no longer at the government level. And that's going to change a lot of who is involved in these conversations and where these conversations go.
Yeah, and I think about as we get closer and closer to the professionalism of college football, which we all hate. Nobody wants that. Leagues have done pro leagues have done a phenomenal job of navigating this. I mean, you have some lockouts, you have some things, but that's a very uncommon thing. And while I agree with you, I don't love the idea of them being employees. I think there are some benefits that the athletes get, that the students get in some regards. But then I also think that maybe this unpalatable thing that we don't really want. I agree with you. Just Jed in Birmingham has the same opinion as TJ in Tampa. I don't really love it, but could it kind of fix some of the issues we have? Because again, I don't want college football to be the NFL, even though it's moving closer and closer to that. But the NFL is really freaking successful. They do a really good job from an organizational standpoint. And could that somewhat fix some of the issues we have now? Again, it is very much a question mark because we don't know what's coming with a new appointee. We don't know what's coming with, even just the House settlement. Does that, I mean, it seems like that gets signed. That seems like it's going the right way, but who even knows? And then on top of that, let's say they are employees. Let's say they all get paid the same. Let's say there is a revenue difference. Not every professor at a school gets the same, right? There's some tenure things that go into it. So there would probably be some built-in protection so that the volleyball girl doesn't get as much as Jeremiah Smith or whatever. But if that's the case, are you then seeing the cap plus, or are you still seeing outside marketing deals kind of come in, collectives be able to do? So I said all that to say maybe it fixes things. Maybe it doesn't fix things.
Yeah, right.
Maybe collectives still kind of say, employees, whatever. Jeremiah Smith, here's $5 million. So I don't know. Maybe it doesn't fix anything. Maybe it does, but it is certainly intriguing to see how this kind of pans out.
It sure is. I think we should start looking at NIL and the transfer portal first for how we can regulate where college football is going. And if you do find the NFL format, you're probably looking at UNC trying to go to the SEC, Florida State trying to go to the Big Ten. You're looking at schools that will want to say, hey, if we're going to consolidate, let's do it from a league standpoint as well. So like you said, I mean, with a move like this where you make them employees or you don't, you're gonna tug everybody in one direction or the other. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Most of what college football has done the last few years has not. We'll see where it goes.
We've got some hot seat updates going into a very pivotal 2025 for some coaches in the Big 12. Let's start the other side, though. Who are the safest three coaches in the Big 12 right now?
Well, that's pretty easy. You got to start with the new guys. Scott Frost at UCF could go 2-10 next season. He still has another year on his job. You can't say that about every coach. If Sonny Dykes goes 2-10 or Dave Aranda goes 2-10, they could both be fired from their jobs. I think when you're looking at the scope of any team in college football, they bring a first-year head coach in and they get a mulligan. So Brent Brennan at Arizona, while he will likely be fired in the offseason, he got a mulligan because it was his first season this year. Now, if you're Rich Rodriguez, Scott Frost, you feel safe, but I don't know if anybody's safer as far as tenured coaches go than what everything that's been displayed to us by Coach Campbell in Ames. I think he has proven to be the great reviver of a program that was never really a program. They had never won 10 games before. He finally does that this year. And every time we start to question Matt Campbell, he just finds a way to win at the highest level. So there are certainly the Kalani Sitakes who are very good and very safe. But if that guy goes 2-10, we start asking a lot of questions. If Matt Campbell goes 2-10, there's nothing that could be done to replace him in Ames, Iowa. He's bought himself a whole lot of time with 11-1, and Kenny Dillingham may be the first runner-up out of those three. If we take out the new head coaches, Dillingham is absolutely on that list. If Arizona State goes 2-10 next season, Dillingham has as long of a leash as he wants the next 3 years, in my opinion, because he's taken them to the college football playoff, almost won a game there, and proven that university can win at football, which has been hard for even legends like Herm Edwards to do. So Matt Campbell up there, Kenny Dillingham, Rich Rodriguez, Scott Frost come to mind immediately as guys that cannot lose their job no matter what happens this season, barring a major scandal.
I'm a little surprised. Sataki, Sanders, probably maybe in that very next tier, right there with them. It'd be pretty hard to imagine. And a small addendum to that. The reason I didn't include Dion, it's also the reason I didn't include a guy like Mike Gundy, who's also got a lot of tenure. I'll get to Gundy later, because I could see them leaving. This should be a conversation of not just hot seat, but guys who in the offseason could make a jump. Do I think Dion will? No. But I know Kenny Dillingham, an alumni of the school, is much more likely to be at Arizona State next offseason no matter what than maybe a Deion Sanders, who is still such a big name. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's go the other way. Let's go the way we started this thing. Hot seat. Who is in the most trouble? Who's in the most danger? Let's do your top one, and then we'll talk about some other candidates too. Whose seat is flaming, as you can see from that graphic down there on the bottom?
Well, Scott Satterfield is not in a good spot. He will be fired next offseason from Cincinnati. And I took a lot of flack in saying that this year on Locked On Big 12 and had a lot of Bearcats fans that said that I'm the issue, not Scott Satterfield, but me.
It's Drake's fault.
Come to find out, maybe it is Scott Satterfield after all. What I want to mention before that, though, and he is my number one, what I want to really dig into before that, Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, according to coacheshotseat.com, is the number one hottest seat in America. He leaves a Big 12 school, a team that's moving into a new conference, moving up into a different conference. And he goes to Wisconsin to go to the Big 10 instead of staying with Cincinnati, and has fallen flat on his face. He's now the number one hottest seat in America. Lincoln Riley leaves Oklahoma and decides, I'm going to go do my own thing in USC, number 3 hottest seat in the country. Number 4, Brent Venables. Oh, we're mighty Oklahoma. We're going to leave the Big 12, go to the SEC and dominate, be able to swim and survive. Nope. Now Brent Venables, the top 5 hottest seats in the country. So interesting to see Big 12 connections, guys who have left the Big 12, schools that have left the Big 12 that are all struggling across college football. Maybe the grass isn't always greener, but like I mentioned, Scott Satterfield is number 1 when it comes to Big 12 coaches and their seat being hot. That's because he's going into year 3 and has not really progressed, and he lost a lot in the transfer portal, didn't gain enough in the transfer portal. Brent Brennan is pretty close behind him at Arizona. Most of the fans of the Wildcats would agree that he was handed the keys to a pretty darn nice vehicle, Mercedes-Benz, and then wrecked it. I mean, crashed it straight into the pavement this season with Tet McMillan and Noah Fafita. They were putrid. Now, his transfer portal class is not bad whatsoever. Top 40, if you ask, 24/7. So Brennan has at least gotten a C+ grade on the offseason. That's not going to help him if he doesn't win games. Brent Brennan, Scott Satterfield, 1A and 1B next season. Even though Brennan is only in his second year at Arizona, I can tell you this, Arizona State going to the college football playoff didn't help Brennan whatsoever.
Yeah. Arizona up there. You mentioned Cincinnati. Who else is maybe not flaming hot like those two, but who else would you maybe keep your eye on, need to perform this season to avoid conversations?
We are in an interesting level of the Big 12 where there are two head coaches that I don't think are directly on the hot seat. You could argue Mike Gundy is, but I'm going to keep him off the hot seat. I'm going to keep Kyle Whittingham off the hot seat because they're in the tenure seat, the kind of pissed off tenure seat where they've been there for a long time and fans are like, dude, just win. Well, why can't we? What happened last season? Can you please just win? So for those two guys, I look at them as, man, they might be forced into retirement. If each of those coaches goes 3-9 this year, I'm not sure if they'd be outright fired, but the conversation would be had with an athletic director, hey, we're going to go ahead and mutually part ways, or you're going to step down and retire and take a severance or pension or something. And so I've got Kyle Whittingham and Mike Gundy both in the same boat, having been there a couple of decades apiece. They have helped build those programs. They're the greatest coach of each program all time, but you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain. And I think each of those are making that quote very true at their universities. So when we're talking about that next tier of coaches that might not be there at the end of the offseason next year, a big piece of that conversation are guys who are long tenured but need to get a job done soon. Otherwise, they'll be forced into retirement.
Maybe outside of Cincinnati, and maybe Arizona too. Which coach has the toughest job in 2025? Like, what's the hardest based on just the outlook for 2025? Who has the toughest job this year?
I still think Kansas should be put in that conversation. We're looking at a new era, Kansas. I said last offseason they would go to the Big 12 championship, win the Big 12 championship. That's not a very easy job. The Jayhawks still need a lot of work, and Leipold proved that by missing a bowl game, going 5-7 this last year. Offensive coordinator leaves, quarterback struggles. You've got question marks next season. Well, I still probably have Kansas in the top 10 in the Big 12 and going to a bowl game. That's a very tough place to win because much of the culture or lack thereof is still in that athletic department. And Jayhawks fans were pretty disappointed this season where they played most of their games on the road, all their games actually on the road or at these neutral sites that they had to craft because their football stadium is undergoing construction. It was just a funky, bad year for the Jayhawks. So spinning it, turning it around, not going to be easy for Lance Leipold. And Willie Fritz. I think Willie Fritz still has a lot that it's similar to a Kansas, right? Houston was good, but they were good at the mid-major level. Now they're in the Power 5. We have to rework our culture, and maybe the head coach who won 10 games there, Dana Holgorsen, got fired. That's never a good spot to be in. Fritz is a great football coach. He still needs 3 or 4 years to build that Houston program. They're going to have to be patient. So I'm not saying they're in a bad spot. They're just in a spot of patience. And like you mentioned, you can't overlook Arizona, Cincinnati, two schools that are in different boats. Arizona never really been good at football. Your head coach, Brent Brennan, is in charge of changing that. And for Cincinnati, they've been to a college football playoff. And now they might have to fire their next head coach who followed up Luke Fickell. Don't be shocked if this time next year, Luke Fickell is the head man again at Cincinnati, a Scott Frost type situation, trying to lead them back to glory.
You heard it here first. Where can you hear more from yourself, Drake C. Toll?
Yeah, at LO Big 12 or at Drake C. Toll on Twitter and wherever you find your podcasts with Locked On Big 12.
Man, I appreciate you. I appreciate BetUS for their support. We'll talk to you soon, bud.
Always, TJ.